Madam Reading Clerk.
For Substitute House Bill 268, Disorderly Conduct Amendments, Representative Ray. This bill was heard in law enforcement with a vote of 7, 3, and 1.
Representative Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I move to circle.
Motion is to circle. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, we actually are working on an amendment we'll have done very shortly, but I'd like to give time to make sure the sponsor of that amendment has time to properly prepare that and have it before us.
The motion is to circle House Bill 2, First Substitute 268. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The bill is circled. Madam Reading Clerk.
House Bill 76, Concealed Weapon Carry Amendments, Representative Mathis. This bill was heard in judiciary with a vote of 7, 2, and 0.
Representative Mathis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. It's an honor for me to bring House Bill 76 to you today. It was brought to me by a constituent earlier this year, and it was an idea that we have worked on for a number of years. This isn't a new concept in Utah. This is something that has been worked on for a long time. What I believe House Bill 76 does is I believe that it brings clarity to the current patchwork of laws on firearm possession in public. And I believe that it maintains the status quo with respect to the schools. It will give gun owners the assurance they can do mundane things like untuck their shirt, put on a jacket, or get out of their vehicle while running errands around town without risk of becoming a criminal for merely carrying a firearm in the wrong condition. What House Bill 76 does not do is it does not change who may carry a firearm. You still have to legally possess the firearm. You can't be drinking. You can't be using drugs. It does not change where they may carry the firearm. We don't allow it in private residences if not wanted, in churches. It doesn't allow carry in schools. That's explicitly prohibited unless you have a concealed carry permit. It does not change when you can carry. No new time or place restrictions are included, and no existing restrictions are excluded. It only changes how you may carry the gun. In the state code, the definition between loaded and unloaded is pretty simple. A loaded firearm has a bullet in the chamber. An unloaded firearm can have a full magazine, 2 mechanical actions to fire. So you can have your clip in, be unloaded in the chamber, and it's loaded. This bill merely allows you to carry a loaded gun concealed. Personally, I am much more comfortable if I'm in public and I don't know that someone's carrying a gun than if I see them carrying it open. Current Utah law allows you to carry if you're 18 years old and legal to possess it, carry an open firearm. Current Utah law allows you to carry a loaded firearm concealed or open in your vehicle if you're 18 years old or older. This bill will move that to the public street outside of your vehicle, but you have to be 21 years old, and I believe that will bring a little clarity to the patchwork of laws. I don't know. A lot of my constituents don't know when we're legal, when we're not legal. Can I have it loaded? Can't I have it loaded? If I have it loaded in my vehicle, I get out to go for a walk or I go fishing, I have to unload it if I don't have a concealed weapon permit. And there's some confusion. And so this bill is an attempt to bring clarity to those laws. With that, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Discussion to the bill. Representative Andrade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I rise in support of this bill. And the main reason I do is because a lot of people have said that this means that we're doing away with background checks. It does not mean that. Most of the people who are interested in carrying a concealed carry permit are still going to go through that process so that they get reciprocity across state lines. That doesn't change. The other thing it doesn't change is it doesn't change that criminals, by definition, are not, at least I should say the smart ones, are not going to go get a criminal background check. They're not. It's just not going to happen. Now, you may have dumb ones that do. but the real smart criminals are going to conceal carry regardless of a permit. This doesn't change anything to do about what criminals will or will not do or prevention. What it does do is it takes away the penalty that law-abiding citizens are required to go through. Therefore, I am completely in support of this bill. If you are a law-abiding citizen and you want to carry a firearm, you should be able to do so. I believe that the Second Amendment was intended to entitle us to do so. And let's be clear, the Second Amendment was not meant for hunting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Further discussion. Representative Arendt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I have a little bit different impression of what this legislation would do based on the information I've received through email and through the hearing. For years, I've been told by members of this body of the importance of the concealed carry classes. In fact, I took one myself. My family owns firearms, and I understand the importance of the Second Amendment. I appreciate the good intentions of the sponsor, but I worry about some of the unintended consequences. This bill would do away with the need for most people over 21 to take the classes, and they would no longer be subject to BCI's background checks. At our hearing, BCI testified that through these background checks, they discover hundreds of people who do not qualify for permits. As with many on the committee, I received hundreds of messages on this bill, and with the Speaker Pro Tem's indulgence, I'd like to read part of one of them. This comes from a retired police supervisor, training officer, firearms instructor with 30 years of experience, and a concealed permit holder. He states, I'm respectfully asking you to vote against House Bill 76, which if passed would do away with the requirement for a permit to carry a loaded, concealed firearm in Utah. I'm asking for this for the following reasons. The concealed firearm permit program is not expensive or difficult to complete. It provides vital training, including familiarizing people with firearms, detailed explanations, and discussions of applicable state and federal laws, and most importantly, ongoing background checks in order to obtain and keep the permit. Doing away with the concealed permit requirement will do away with the ongoing background checks that go with it. Buying a gun only requires passing a background check at the time of purchase. To obtain and keep a concealed firearm permit, the applicant permit holder is subject to nearly daily background checks through the Utah cross-match system. The Utah concealed firearm permit requirement is an indispensable process that allows law-abiding citizens easy and timely access to a concealed permit, while at the same time providing a safe environment for everyone because of the required class and ongoing background checks. As a concealed permit holder, I have no problem with the requirements now in place. For the reasons articulated by this officer, I ask you to oppose House Bill 76.
Thank you, Representative Arendt. Representative Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I stand in support of this piece of legislation. Quite often I've heard this legislation referred to as constitutional carry. So if I look at the basic definition of Constitution, that's the document that this country was founded upon. And I look at it over the years, and in reference to the Second Amendment and the concealed carry permit, I have to pay for that permit if I want one. By the way, I don't have one, nor will I ever have a concealed weapons permit. Fundamentally, I don't agree with it. Although under Utah law and federal law, I can carry a weapon concealed without a permit. But even if I couldn't, I wouldn't have a permit because it notifies the state that I have the permit. Just that in and of itself, I think, is in violation of my constitutional rights. Do I have to pay to exercise my First Amendment right, the right of free speech? I do not have to pay for that. Do I have to pay for my Fourth Amendment right? Unreasonable search and seizure. No, I don't have to pay for that. Do I have to pay for my Fifth Amendment right? Self-incrimination. No, I do not have to pay for that. Due process, 14th. Do I have to pay for that? Matter of fact, on the 14th Amendment, the state of Utah will even pay, if you will, you to exercise that right by hiring a public defender. But I don't have to pay for it. So why do I have to pay to exercise my Second Amendment right? Now, this is an open carry state. If I don't have a permit to carry a gun in the state of Utah, do I have to have the permit to carry it open? I do not. So just because you have a piece of cloth over a weapon, now I have to pay to exercise that right, just because I put a piece of cloth over the weapon. Fundamentally, I just have a problem with that. I've always had a problem with it, and I think that's demonstrated because I do not have a concealed weapons permit. The argument is that the classes are good, and I agree. The classes for concealed weapons permits are very good, and I would suggest that people go and attend those classes. But do I have to attend that class if I'm going to carry the weapon not concealed? No. I can still carry that weapon not concealed, and I don't even have to go to that class. So I just have a problem just because I have the weapon covered. Why do I have to pay to exercise that? I would strongly ask this body to support this piece of legislation. I think it's good legislation, and I appreciate the sponsor of the bill bringing it forward. Thank you.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative Polson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Will the sponsor yield to a question?
The sponsor yield.
Be glad to.
Go ahead.
I was asked by a group of parents to be assured, have you assure them about how this will affect the schools. Then the specific question, if this bill were passed, would people be able to openly carry a loaded gun in a school? Would you clarify, please?
If I might, I answer that question with a letter from Patty Harrington. Just for your information, here's the new description of our position on House Bill 76. Please call if you have questions or concerns. Thank you. House Bill 76, Concealed Weapon Carry Amendments, allows a person 21 years of age or older who may lawfully possess a dangerous weapon to do so without a permit. Their position is, watch, school attorneys advise that this bill will not affect schools.
Thank you. As someone who grew up with guns, in fact, one of my first dates with my husband over 40 years ago was target shooting, and I cleaned house. I do have some concerns with this bill, and expressed by letters that I've received recently. One this morning from a neighbor who told me, she said, you know, we're gun people, and I have just completed my concealed carry class this week, and I want you to speak for me in opposition to this bill. She went on to tell me how useful she felt the class was, and even though she had lived with guns with her sons and husband and daughter in her house, how useful this information was. And, you know, we all have the right to drive, but we wouldn't expect to operate a dangerous vehicle without some training and a few rules. And with this, I just want to represent my constituents in opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Polson. Representative Oda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I also rise in support of this bill. This bill only does two things. It only changes two things in the entire firearms issue on conceal. First thing is that you can conceal. Second is that it can be loaded. Those are the only two things. It changes nothing about who can purchase or how it can be purchased. Any background check issues does not affect where they can be taken, or does not give anyone any more ability to use the weapon at all. As far as classes and things of that sort, we encourage more education, more training. But it should never be a prerequisite for the right to defend yourself. Now, those who are going to be covering up their weapon are mostly those who are already basically carrying openly. And this would give some comfort to those who have some consternation about people seeing guns in the open. Now they're allowed to cover it up. The classes are great, absolutely. I think it's fantastic that people would take that. But we also don't have within our training what's live fire requirements, because again, proficiency and training should not be a prerequisite for the right to defend yourself. Bad guys don't obey the law. They're going to be carrying concealed anyway. I like the element of surprise. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would wholeheartedly ask that you support this bill. It's the right thing to do. It upholds both the U.S. and the Utah Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. We heard this bill in the Judiciary Committee. I appreciate the efforts of our good bill sponsor. He's a good man, and I have great respect for him, but with all due respect, I just think this is a bad idea. There's a feeling that that exists on the part of many people, and we have gotten thousands of emails about this, literally. But there's a feeling on the part of many who have written us, and maybe some in this body, that the Second Amendment rights are, as they have been reiterated to us by many who write and speak, God-given and inviolate, and that somehow the right to bear an arm is something that cannot be restricted in any way under the Constitution. That's just wrong. The Second Amendment is the thing that gives us the right to bear arms. And it does so under very clear constitutional law, repeated by many, many Supreme Court cases, including District of Columbia versus Heller, the most recent Supreme Court case. It does not restrict the states from putting in place reasonable regulations relating to arms, to guns. That's important, because what we're talking about with this bill is a significant stepping away from regulations about the bearing of arms and use of them in our society. In fact, what we're dealing with when you want to go out and purchase a concealed carry permit or obtain a concealed carry permit is a requirement that you not have been convicted of an offense involving moral turpitude or the use of alcohol or domestic violence. Any of those things disqualify an individual from receiving a concealed carry permit. That's not true under this bill. So it isn't accurate to say that the only thing this changes is the ability to put a coat over a bill or a gun or not. That's not accurate. This bill, although it isn't the intent of the bill sponsor as he testified at the Judiciary Committee, the effect of this bill will be to considerably loosen the restrictions to openly carry a gun. And this leads to my concern about the bill, which is public safety. I don't dispute the idea that under the Second Amendment, each of us in this building has the right, barring some of these other restrictions that are in place, to carry a gun. The great majority of people in our society have the personal right to own a gun and use it. That's fine. But when we're talking about openly carrying guns and increasing the likelihood that those guns are present in our society, in the groups that we congregate with, you're talking about the likelihood, significantly increased likelihood of accidental discharge and injury and death coming because of accidental discharge. You're talking about the likelihood of significant increases in the number of injuries and deaths that occur because individuals are driving down the road and they get angry, somebody cuts them off, and you have somebody putting a bullet through somebody else's window. You're talking about a significant increase in the likelihood that in a moment of despondency, a 16-year-old kid grabs a weapon that's available to them and uses that as a means with incredible lethality to put an end to their life, when if that weapon wasn't so available, so easy to get to, they would have to come up with more difficult ways of ending their life. The presence and availability of weapons increases significantly the number of deaths from suicide. Those are facts. I don't have a problem with guns. I enjoy them. It's fun to go out and target shoot. I'm not a big hunter myself, but I like going out and shooting guns. I'm a guy. I think most guys like guns for proper purposes. So my animus here is not anti-gun and it's not anti-Second Amendment. It is public safety. I want to make sure that people who have guns and they carry them out in society have gone through some fundamental, fairly reasonable restrictions in my mind to having those guns. I've gone through the same concealed weapon permit that has been referenced earlier in this debate. It was a great thing. In fact, it was taught by my colleague from Syracuse who just spoke, Clearfield, and I learned a lot. I would be remorseful if we made that guns available more easily to anybody who wants them, openly carrying them without going through those fundamental processes. So I have to tell you, based on public safety, I think that this is a bad bill and I'm voting against it.
Thank you, Representative King. Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I stand to speak in favor of this piece of legislation, and I'll tell you, 3 years ago, I was just the opposite. And my argument then, 3 years ago, was many of the things that I've heard about this particular bill, and it had to do with in-car carry. And I made the same exact argument that there was all these issues that were going to come up with people carrying in cars, that people wouldn't be trained well enough, that people would make mistakes, and there would be all kinds of incidents occurring. There hasn't been any. I look at the states that have passed this similar type of legislation. I don't see it happening in those states as well. And so by looking at all those things, I've come to the realization, the conclusion myself, that all this is giving us the right to do what we constitutionally have a right to do, and that's carry a firearm if we so choose to do so, and it puts the onus and the obligation on the person who chooses to carry that weapon. If they're not trained, bad things are going to happen to them. If they're a bad guy, as we've heard called, we're going to be able to deal with them in law enforcement appropriately. There are mechanisms out there where we can find out who is and who's not legal to carry a weapon. It's going to cause a little bit more work on law enforcement's part if we come across somebody carrying a weapon, but those people are going to get charged appropriately. So I appreciate what the good representative from the basin is talking about. And the one other point I wanted to bring out from the representative of Salt Lake, they mentioned that driving a car is a right. Driving a car is not a right. Driving a car is a privilege. That's why we have to get driver's licenses. A right, what we've been told is this is our Second Amendment right to possess and bear arms. So there is a difference that we have to differentiate when it comes to driving versus bearing arms and having the ability to carry and have a weapon with you. With that, I would ask for your support for this bill.
Thank you, Representative Perry. Representative Sagers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to talk about my experience with weapons or anything else. I think that's kind of beating a dead horse. I'm sorry, would the sponsor yield to a question? I apologize. I'm assuming you will.
Sponsor yield.
Yes, I will.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure why, but I'm uncomfortable with the bill. Some of the conversation today, the discussion has helped alleviate part of that. I guess it comes down to, a concealed weapon permit. It's not that difficult to access. Again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse by telling you who in my family has one. It's not relevant. I remember as a kid, before I get a license, I had to take a gun safety class, and that was very valuable to me. I agree that the right to bear arms is a constitutional thing that is unequivocal. I'm also deeply concerned about some of the conversation going on at the federal level. I'm very disturbed by that, and I'm very fearful of what could happen. I guess where I struggle is should everyone be allowed to carry a concealed weapon? Could you help me get my mind around that, please?
We have restrictions on who can carry firearms today. You have to be able to pass a background check. You can't be a felon. You have to be a law-abiding citizen. This is a bill that deals with law-abiding citizens, and that's all it basically deals with. We have the right to do many things, as mentioned, in this country. We have the right to schools, good schools. We have the right to drive. We have the right to have good roads. We have the right for good hospitals and health care, or the privilege. We have those privileges. But we have the right to worship as we choose without government interference. We have the right to stand and speak our mind without government interference. And likewise, by the Utah State Constitution and by the federal Constitution, we have the right to keep and bear arms. That already has sideboards on it. We don't allow guns to be carried in schools. We don't allow guns. This bill won't, and our laws existing don't allow you to carry them into a private residence if they're not wanted. It doesn't allow you to carry them into a church if the church doesn't want them. We have sideboards already. This is for law-abiding citizens to carry a firearm if they so choose. And in my world, there's a lot that choose to do that without a permit. You've heard today that this is going to encourage more openly carried firearms. It will not do that because we already have open carry laws in the state of Utah. In my mind, and part of the reason I'm carrying this bill is I truly believe that it will allow more of those guns to be covered up, bringing more, in my mind, the ability to carry a gun without stirring up the public. I have great faith. I have great faith in the goodness of people. And I don't believe that the acts of a few bad people should limit the rights of the many good, honest, honorable people in the United States, and particularly in Utah. Making you comfortable with this is a choice that you'll have to make, and each one of you will. I would hope that you would all vote your conscience on this. To me, this is something that's important, and I believe strongly that it's the right thing to do. But I can't help you get your arm around something that you're not comfortable with, but I do believe that it's the right thing, and that's all I can say about that.
Mr. Speaker, Pro Tem, may I ask just one follow-up question?
Go ahead.
I agree with everything you said. I support the principles that you espouse. I suppose I'm trying to articulate my concern. I guess my concern is, right now, if I do have a concealed weapon permit, it's not a big deal. To get that, I underwent a background check, as everyone does or did or will. I guess I'm concerned. There are some people that I believe that probably shouldn't carry a weapon. And by having that weapon concealed, I guess that's where I struggle. But you're right. It's my problem. I'll have to make a decision in a few moments. And thank you.
Thank you. Representative Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I grew up around guns. I was taught a great respect for firearms. My dad raised his sons, my brother and I, duck hunting, and the first thing we learned before we handled a firearm was to check and see if it's loaded. That's how we were raised. It was our culture. It was our heritage. That's where I come from. My dad served in the United States Marine Corps. His 4 brothers all served active duty military, and each one served in Vietnam. Our family knows firearms. We were raised around them, and we were taught respect. I remember as a kid getting out of school for deer hunting. We actually had a day off. It was called Deer Hunting Day. And we had the gun racks in the back of our pickup truck, and we came to school, firearms in the back of the gun rack, ready to be let out of school so we could go hunting. Again, it was part of our culture, part of our heritage, where we came from, how we were raised. But I get a little concerned because this issue seems so emotional and so charged up. And today we come from a different culture. My son has had hunter safety and passed. My daughters have not. But people growing up today, we don't have deer hunting day. We don't have the same gun culture. And I struggle trying to teach my own sons the same thing that my father taught me. Because in today's culture, we have video games. And what are they taught? They're taught to shoot first and ask questions later. And so on the video screen, you got the person right there. They've got their gun. Never runs out of ammunition. You never have to reload. It's just one game after another. So I worry about that and trying to take a more holistic approach. And I love this body, Mr. Speaker. And I have respect for every legislator here. But I submit to you, it's easier to gain access to a firearm than it is to get access to mental health care. Now, we all want to talk about the big picture, the Second Amendment, and the right to good health and having access to health care. What's to prevent a man in camouflage with a firearm strapped to his back on the 4th of July, walking through Murray Park, and people in today's culture not be concerned with that? Is that alarming? I can tell you for some of the families in my community, it would be very alarming. We live in a different culture. I enjoy my firearms. I teach my sons. We shoot archery. We target shoot on archery. That's what we like to do. And back when I was a kid, we had the Lions Club, and we did clay pigeon shooting. And I don't know how much of that exists today anymore. But I hope the passion and the support that we have for our Second Amendment carries on throughout everything that we do here. And when I walk downtown, or when I go into a department store, Fashion Place Mall, wherever you want to go, and people have a firearm on their back, is this the kind of society that we want to live in? Does that help bring tourism here? Is this the message we want to send? And just because we can doesn't mean that we should. That's my comments, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cosgrove. Representative Hall.
I'd like to move to amend.
That's in order.
Amendment number 1, dated February 26, 2013. 318.
Motion is to adopt amendment number 1. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes. The crux of the amendment is listed on lines 75 and 76, which makes this bill applicable in counties of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th class as defined in 17-50-501. Is it on? I appreciate the bill, and one of the concerns that was brought up during the committee hearing was that individuals who are in rural areas where they might be moving their cattle or out in a very rural area, if an individual is carrying openly and it starts to rain or it gets cold, they put on a jacket and suddenly they become illegal. And the good representative, the sponsor of the bill, is exactly right in that regard. And frankly, I think that individuals who find themselves in that situation should be able to carry concealed without a license. And but I believe that that sort of situation is a very different world than what we may find at in City Creek Mall or Valley Fair Mall, which is in my district. I believe that this is a good policy in that it would just be for counties of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th class. That ends my presentation.
Thank you, Representative Hall. Discussion to the motion to amend. Representative Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Excuse me, let me go back to the bill sponsor. Thank you. Representative Mathis. Go ahead, Representative.
I would strongly oppose the amendment. I would challenge anyone in here to tell me when they cross a county line in the state of Utah. I would challenge anyone in here to think that we're going to add uniformity and clarity, as we're trying to attempt to do with this bill, if all of a sudden every time we cross a county line we have to change the rules or the laws. I don't know where Wasatch County starts and Uintah County stops. I don't know where Uintah County starts and Grand County stops. I don't know where Salt Lake starts and Davis stops. That would just raise havoc with the laws. We need a uniform law for the state of Utah, and uniformity is key to our firearms laws. They always have been in Utah, and I believe they always should be. We need uniformity in our laws, and so for that reason I'm opposed to this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Mathis. Further discussion to the motion to amend. Representative Wilcox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. So first, everything that the representative from Eastern Utah has stated. But primarily in another life, I run retail establishments. And every once in a while, somebody decides to come in with a big old something or other on their hip. On the open carry. And as you can imagine, in retail establishments, we have a lot of families there, and not all of them are comfortable or familiar with the Utah statute on open carry. And so I'll immediately get an escalation from my employees about what they're seeing. If nothing else, this particular statute allows this person who, in every case that this has happened, they haven't threatened anyone, they've been perfectly kind and appropriate in their behavior, other than this particular incident. This would allow them to have it covered without it being a crime, and it would do it statewide. Whether or not he goes through the classes, that is the responsible thing to do. I think that's what he probably should be doing. But right now, so many of the arguments that we've heard have been about open carry, that we already have, that is already the law. The primary change here is about whether or not we're going to decriminalize it if they conceal. So in this case, from this particular operator's opinion, I would prefer that he conceal without being criminalized. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are speaking to the motion to amend, amendment number 1. Representative Hemingway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'm thrilled to see this amendment. I'm not like a lot of the people in here. I grew up in the city. I spent a lot of time working in the middle of nowhere, like Red Wash Field, and I'm sure that the fine representative from Vernal knows where that is. But I did grow up in the city, and I can't even imagine how discomforting it is to people who have lived in the city all their lives. And a lot of the people who live here have had that experience, to go into a computer store or any other store and see that gun slung over the back. I think that having a weapon with you when you're out doing your ranching or doing the things that you do out in the open or hunting, I think that's great. And I think that it's my opinion that this is an awfully good amendment. It allows those who really need the weapons to have them. It doesn't discourage anything from happening within the, it doesn't change really anything in the open carry. So I think this is a good amendment, and I would ask your support.
Thank you. Further discussion. Representative Johnny Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I want to rise in support of the amendment. Appreciate the sponsor's courage in bringing it up. I can see a need for this law in rural areas. It would be a convenience for folks in these counties. I'm sure there's a number of them who proudly open carry and would want to be able to put a raincoat or something over it in the if the weather turns bad. But I'll tell you, I've discussed this issue at length with my constituents on the west side of Salt Lake County, and easily 95% of them are very uncomfortable with the idea of changing this law and removing the need for the permit. And many of the people who respond are permit holders. I'm a permit holder. But we like the idea of the background check. We like the idea of taking the class. We like the idea of people demonstrating, you know, some responsibility when they take on the responsibility to conceal a firearm. And just, again, strongly in favor of the amendment. I think it makes the bill palatable. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Oda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Utah has a uniformity law already in place. It's 7610-500 uniformity law. It reads, the individual right to keep and bear arms being constitutionally protected, a constitutionally protected right, the legislature finds the need to provide uniform laws throughout the state. Except as specifically provided by state law, a citizen of the United States or a lawfully admitted alien shall not be A, prohibited from owning, possessing, purchasing, selling, transferring, transporting, or keeping any firearm at his place of residence, property, business, or any vehicle lawfully in his possession or lawfully under his control, or B, required to have a permit or license to purchase, own, possess, transport, or keep a firearm. And paragraph 2, this part is uniformly applicable throughout the state and in all of its political subdivisions and municipalities. All authority to regulate firearms shall be reserved to the state, except where the legislature specifically delegates responsibility to local authorities or state entities, unless specifically authorized by the legislature by statute. A local authority or state entity may not enact any ordinance, regulation, or rule. So it has to stay uniform. The only way we can break it up at all is to allow a local entity to do that. And that's not what this amendment would do. Again, just like the sponsor of the bill, the reason for this is so that you know where you stand when you cross a city border or county border or wherever it might be, and that's just not right to put the onus on somebody that just traveling through the city. That could be a pretty ugly situation. So, thank you. I would oppose the amendment.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Layton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I appreciate the representative's courage in bringing forth this amendment also, but I rise to oppose it. I don't think that we as a legislature want to deny people their right to defend themselves, particularly in urban areas where there might be more danger. And also, we're not talking about the right to carry, we're talking about the right to discreetly carry. And for the reasons that several of the good representatives from the more urban areas have brought up, this is a highly charged environment that we live in. People have a lot of fears, a lot of anxieties. And I would submit to you that by passing this bill without the amendment, we allow people to carry more civilly, more discreetly, and to cause less public alarm in places, and yet they still have their right to defend themselves. As a mother of 4 daughters, I would not want any of them to ever feel unsafe, and if they needed to carry or take something somewhere in order to feel safe, then I think they should be able to do it. I personally have a concealed carry permit, but I understand those who don't want to be in the database, and I agree with the good representative from up north, Ogden, I think, who said, well, several of them. No, but I think that the reason that the bill's a good idea is not just for the rural counties. It addresses the issue of the alarmist feelings people have when they see a firearm. This change in culture means a lot of people just aren't comfortable with them anymore. But the people who are and feel that they want to carry them could now do so discreetly without causing alarm in the community. And so I oppose this amendment and ask that the body would support people's right to do that throughout the state.
Thank you. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I would like to speak to the amendment as the only representative, I think, that has spoken other than the sponsor who represents a district that the amendment would apply to. I think I should speak. So my argument would be that if you have concerns about this bill, then those concerns apply whether you're in West Valley City or Orem City or Heber City or Park City. And if you support this bill, then those reasons for supporting it apply whether you are in Orem City or West Valley City or Heber City or Park City. With the indulgence of the Speaker Pro Tem, I would actually like to speak briefly to the bill, and the reason is, if this amendment passes, this is simply applying the bill to my county, so I think it's germane to the amendment, and I won't turn my light on again. I believe that the amendment should not be adopted and the bill itself should not be adopted.
Representative Powell, we'll need to stick to the amendment. You may speak later to the bill, but please speak to the amendment.
All right, then I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Grover.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I call previous question.
Previous question has been called. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion passes. Representative Hall for summation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Again, this proposed amendment applies only to the counties of the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th class. With respect to the concern regarding the uniformity, as you notice in the amendment, that's also taken care of in the amendment on line 25. So that would no longer be a concern. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is to adopt amendment number 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
No.
I rule the motion fails. Further discussion to the bill. Representative D.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'd move to circle.
Motion is to circle. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I'm concerned about the bill and working with the sponsor on the bill. And I think there's some other conversations we can have with other members that will probably help this bill. So I'd like to have that opportunity.
Thank you. The motion is to circle. Discussion to the motion to circle. Representative Mathis to the motion to circle.
I would rather not. We've had a good discussion, an honest discussion, and a fair discussion. I understand where our good representative from Weber, wherever, Weber, Davis, is. If we circle, we're going to end up coming back and having a discussion again. But I understand what he's talking about. I understand where he's going. And I'm okay with that for now.
The motion is to circle. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no.
No.
Rule the motion passes. The bill is circled. Madam Reading Clerk.
First substitute House Bill 204, Election Amendments, Representative Elison. This bill was heard in political subdivisions with a vote of 11-0-0.
Representative Elison.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion to circle.
Motion is to circle. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, there's several substitutes in the works that I want to make sure they have time to be brought forth before we discuss it.
Thank you. The motion is to circle. Discussion to the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The bill is circled. Madam Reading Clerk.
House Bill 105, Serious Youth Offender Amendments, Representative Snow. This bill was heard in judiciary with a vote of 7-0-2.
Representative Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. As this body knows, our criminal justice system in the state of Utah is divided into two parts, one that deals with adult offenders and one that deals with juvenile offenders. This particular bill deals with juvenile offenders whose crimes alleged are serious enough that a prosecutor who is prosecuting those may feel inclined to transfer them to adult court to stand trial as an adult and ultimately be sentenced and perhaps even incarcerated as an adult. Now, currently in Utah, there are three ways that can be accomplished. House Bill 105 deals only with one particular process. And let me tell you why I'm bringing the bill. Under that process as it exists today, an offender, a youth offender who qualifies over the age of 16 and who has committed one of the offenses enumerated, fairly serious offenses at lines 31 through 44, his case or her case can be transferred to adult court after a hearing is held in juvenile court before the juvenile court judge, and as long as certain elements are met. Now, if those elements are met, the juvenile court judge sitting and hearing the case has no discretion except to bind that young person over to stand trial as an adult. It is that rigidity in the bill that prompts it is that rigidity in the existing law that prompts me bringing this bill. Now, I will tell you that this bill that is before you has been worked on at least for 2 years. It is supported by the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, the Utah Sentencing Commission, the Utah Juvenile Justice Service, and also by the Statewide Association of Prosecutors. What does the bill do? It keeps in place the procedure where those who have been charged with serious offenses can still be transferred to the jurisdiction of the juvenile court. However, it broadens the discretion of the court. Now, why is that necessary? Under the current rigid structure, we actually have unintended consequences where a juvenile, under this scenario, who meets those requirements, maybe has very limited involvement with the juvenile court previously, but meets those elements, could be transferred to the district court and either plead guilty or be found guilty and then stand before that court for sentencing. The problem with the current system is if the offense is not of such a magnitude that the court would be inclined to impose a jail sentence or imprisonment on that juvenile, the court most likely is inclined to order probation. The problem with that scenario is our adult probation in the state is not really equipped to deal with a juvenile supervision. As a result, and as an unintended consequence, those serious youth offenders who then are transferred to adult probation, have very limited supervision. Their supervision terminates after a period of time, and the youth offender is not really, and his or her issues are not really addressed, at least to the same extent that they would be under a juvenile court supervised probation. Now, the standard by which a juvenile court judge making that determination is fairly significant. The juvenile court judge, before they would retain this offender in juvenile court, would have to make two findings. One, that it's in the best interest of the juvenile that jurisdiction be retained in the juvenile court, and the second, that it is in the best interest of the safety and welfare of the citizens of this state. So it's a fairly narrow band in which a juvenile offender who had committed some serious offense, whose jurisdiction would be retained. But the benefit would be, on retention in the juvenile court system, whether it were required detention or whether it required supervision, is our system in the state is then able to address the needs of that juvenile, and the likelihood of reoffending is much less. In fact, the statistics show across the country that in cases where a juvenile is tried as an adult and then is put on probation as an adult under adult supervision, the recidivism, the rate at which they reoffend is higher than if that same juvenile were maintained under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court. Now, that's a lot of talking to say that this bill provides additional discretion to our juvenile court judges to make the right decision in deciding whether or not to transfer a juvenile offender for serious offenses to the district court to stand trial or to be sentenced. I'm ready to take questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Representative Snow. Discussion to the bill. Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Will the sponsor yield?
Will the sponsor yield?
Yes, sure.
Go ahead.
If you could, Representative, could you explain for us the fiscal note?
There is a fiscal note that is appended to this bill, and I think if you each have a copy of that. The fiscal bill current impact appears, based on meetings that has been held with the fiscal analysts as recently as this afternoon, is that impact is probably going to be reduced. And you don't have it in front of you in writing, but I believe it's going to be reduced to about $50,000. Now, it is true there is an impact, but if we have to decide, I suppose, from a policy standpoint, whether or not the long-term costs and risks associated with moving those juvenile offenders who commit serious offenses to the adult system, their chances of reoffending. And there's a saying among juvenile court officers and those who supervise juveniles, and it goes something like this. Once we take a juvenile and we put them in a certain environment, in jail or in prison with adults, criminals, you have almost certainly created another criminal, and a serious criminal, once that juvenile is released. And so while it is true, Representative, that there is a fiscal note, my understanding is, number one, it can be mitigated, and number two, it's my position that this is a good policy, and we'll have to deal with that, but it's good policy for the state in the long run to assume that cost rather than creating long-range issues that we're going to have to deal with later.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I want to address that. point. One of the things that you'd look at, if you look carefully at the fiscal note, is there is some savings to the cost of administering the adult justice system because of this. And there is some additional expenditure to the juvenile justice system. It's not troubling to me that we're spending more money on the juvenile justice system with these kids. I think this is a great bill. I commend the bill sponsor for his work on this, because giving greater discretion to keep juveniles out of the adult system, who should, in the minds of those working in the juvenile system, be kept in the juvenile system, increases the likelihood that we're going to be able to have those kids given the resources that they need to keep them from reoffending, to keep them from recidivating. That's a positive thing. This is, in my mind, an investment in the future of these kids. I'm glad to hear that the fiscal note is lower than what the bill sponsor originally obtained. I think that's a good thing, but I don't want the body to be deterred by the existence of the fiscal note at all, because the resources that we're talking about are going into helping rehabilitate these kids before they become habitual offenders or before they become adults. So I would encourage your support of this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion to the bill. Representative McKiff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I wish to offer a simple analogy to make a point. If you want to be a good horseman, you have to know when to pull back on the reins and when to ease off. But you can never know that until you're in the saddle and you see what the horse does. And that same concept applies to young people. It is impossible for us to statutorily fix whether a youth should be tried as an adult or as a juvenile. And that decision cannot be fairly and realistically made until you're in the saddle. And the youth is before the court, and the court can evaluate all the considerations related to this young person and the offense that's been committed. So I agree this is sound public policy, and we should support the bill.
Representative McKiff. Further discussion to the bill. Seeing none, Representative Snow for summation.
Thank you. In summary, number one, this does not change or do away with the process that we have in our state where some serious youth offenders ought to be tried as an adult, and in some cases, in very egregious cases, ought to be incarcerated as an adult. That still remains in place. The second thing, this bill, as has been mentioned, provides some discretion, additional discretion to juvenile court judges to help make the decision that's in the best interest of the person charged, but also in the best interest of the public. And the third thing that I'd mention with respect to the fiscal bill, one way or another, whether that juvenile is going to be supervised or incarcerated as an adult or supervised as a juvenile, there is going to be a cost. And there is a greater cost in the structure that we build with respect to supervising and rehabilitating juveniles. But in the long run, I believe it's money well spent in the state, and I urge your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Representative Snow. Voting is open on House Bill 105. Seeing all present having voted, Representative Moss, would like to vote? Voting will be closed. House Bill 105, having received 73 yea votes and 0 nay votes, has passed this body and will be transmitted to the Senate for further consideration. Representative Ipson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I'd like to make a motion to reconsider.
Okay. You were on the prevailing side?
Yes.
Will you state
Having
the
voted on the
number?
prevailing side, I make a motion that we reconsider our actions on House Bill 307, CPR training in schools.
Okay, the motion is to reconsider our actions on House Bill 307. Would you like to speak to that?
I would. The sponsor would like to revisit this bill and like to give her the opportunity to do that.
Discussion to the motion to reconsider. Representative Jeremy Peterson.
Just to be clear, he wants to resuscitate this bill. Is that okay?
At least you didn't have your guitar when you said that. Representative Ipson for summation on the motion to reconsider.
Being on life support, I'll waive.
The motion is to reconsider our actions on House Bill 307. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. The bill will be placed at the top of the third reading calendar. And what?
Good one. Thank you, Larry. You feel with your fingers, right?
Representative Peterson for announcements from the third House. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Peterson, hold on just a moment, please.
Okay.
Madam Reading Clerk for communications.
From the Senate. February 26, 2013. Madam Speaker, the President of the Senate has signed First Substitute House Bill 67, Property Taxation Revisions by Representative Forer, and First Substitute House Bill 74, Property Tax Modifications by Representative Mathis. These bills are transmitted for the signature of the Speaker. Respectfully, Leslie McLean, Secretary of the Senate.
These bills have been signed by the Speaker Pro Tem and will be referred to staff for enrolling. Madam Reading Clerk.
February 26, 2013. Madam Speaker, the Senate passed as amended Senate Bill 61, Hunting Permit Amendments by Senator Christensen, Senate Bill 62, Governor's Fire Suppression Authority by Senator Dayton, Senate Bill 94, Government Records Amendments by Senator Bramble, Senate Bill 97, Propelling a Bodily Substance Amendments by Senator Stevenson, Senate Bill 98, Propelling... Andy, these are wrong. Senate Bill 120, Target Shooting and Wildfire Regulations. As substituted and amended, first substitute Senate Bill 124, Sales and Use Tax Exemption for Database Access by Senator Harper. As amended, Senate Bill 145, County Attorney Chapter Recodification by Senator Weiler. Senate Bill 159, Theft Amendments by Senator Thatcher. Senate Bill 160, Patronizing a Prostitute Amendments by Senator Jay Stevenson. Senate Bill 164, Parole Violator Centers Allocations by Senator Robles. Senate Bill 165, Physical Therapy Practice Act Amendments by Senator Weiler. Passed as substituted. Second substitute Senate Bill 166, Hospital Assessment Amendments by Senator Hilliard. Senate Bill 168, Certified Public Accountant Licensing Amendments by Senator Bramble. And SCR 6, Concurrent Resolution on Federal Gas Tax by Senator Henderson. And Senate Bill 97, Propelling a Bodily Substance Amendments by Senator Jay Stevenson, and Senate Bill 98, Propelling a Bodily Substance Revisions by Senator Jay Stevenson. These bills are transmitted for consideration. Respectfully, Leslie McLean, Secretary of the Senate.
These bills have been read for the first time and will be referred to rules. Representatives, if I may have your attention for a moment, these are bills that have passed the House but that do not have a Senate sponsor. They will stay with the docket clerk until you tell them who the Senate sponsor is. Representative Peterson, announcements from the third house.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Representatives, earlier today I sent out a envelope, looks like this, has a little cat in a hat on it. If you have this other envelope at your desk, would you please bring that to me? Also, if you are fortunate enough not to be in appropriations meeting till 7 o'clock this evening, there is a dinner at 6 with the Sundance Film Festival at 410 Campus Center Drive here in Salt Lake, followed by the movie Austinland at 7. So enjoy yourself this evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Representative Seelig, any announcements from the minority party? Representative Ibsen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I make a motion that we adjourn till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
The motion is to adjourn until Wednesday, February 27th at 10 a.m. All in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion passes.